7 bone-chilling horror stories. I ignored my instincts at 3 a.m. and regretted it forever. The clock struck 3, the witching hour, when shadows danced with whispers of the unknown. It was a time when the world slipped into a hushed stillness, and anything felt possible. The streets were bare, save for the flickering streetlights that fought against the oppressive darkness. A chill swept through the air, sharp enough to slice through the bravest of souls. The night creaked and groaned, full of secrets waiting to be unearthed. This was the hour of choices of decisions that could haunt a person forever. In a small town, where nothing ever happened, the legend of the old Miller house loomed large. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, eyes darting nervously, and voices cracking with fear. They said anyone who ventured near at night vanished into thin air, swallowed whole by the night itself. The windows were painted shut with dust and neglect, yet sometimes a flicker of light and ominous glow could be seen through the grime, causing a knot to tighten in the stomach of anyone who dared to look. One fateful night, Mike, curious and maybe a bit foolish, found himself outside the crumbling facade of the cursed house. He felt an irresistible pull, like the house was beckoning him closer. Hands trembling, he clutched his flashlight, the beam barely breaking through the heavy darkness. As he stepped onto the overgrown lawn, the air prickled with unseen energy. A crow cawed from a nearby tree, its harsh cry like a warning, echoing through the silence. Mike felt a pang of fear, a heavy, suffocating sensation, tightening around his heart. But he brushed it aside. Who was he to back down? Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, but when he shone the light towards the front door, he was met with something more than he bargained for. The door creaked open, just a crack, as if someone or something was eagerly waiting. An icy shiver danced down Mike's spine. It was as if the house held its breath, poised for him to cross the threshold. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With adrenaline pumping, Mike took a deep breath, pushed the door open wider, and stepped inside. The stale air hit him like a brick wall, thick with secrets and regret. The floorboards creaked underfoot, like the moan of a long-buried ghost. Shadows stretched and twisted, playing tricks on his mind. He could hear whispers, low and haunting, curling around him like tendrils. Get out, they seemed to say. But he pressed on, drawn deeper into its depths. What he would find inside the Miller house was a truth that would unravel everything he thought he knew, and a darkness that would hunt him beyond the fragile safety of dawn. As the door slammed shut behind him, sealing his fate, one question loomed large in his mind. Was it too late to turn back? Inside the Miller house, the darkness thickened like a fog, encasing Mike in a cocoon of dread. The beams of his flashlight danced over the peeling wallpaper and shattered glass, revealing remnants of a life long forgotten. Dust motes floated lazily through the air, caught in the weak light, ghostly figures frozen in time. Each step he took echoed in the haunting silence, amplifying the sensation that something, or someone, was watching him. The whispers grew louder, fluttering against his ears, buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. Leave, it's not safe. Their urgency prickled at the back of his neck. He swallowed hard. The lump in his throat felt like a heavy stone. As he ventured further, his heart raced like a drum, a steady beat punctuating the stillness. He paused, glancing back at the door, now a mere silhouette in the dark. Regret seeped in a fleeting thought that he should have heeded the warnings. But curiosity, that insatiable hunger for the unknown, pushed him forward. The flashlight flickered against the far wall, illuminating a staircase spiraling into the gloom of the second floor. It looked inviting and terrifying all at once. He could almost hear muted laughter trailing from the shadows. Summoning what little courage remained, Mike stepped forward. Each creak of the staircase sounded a clarion call, urging him deeper into the heart of the house. Halfway up, he froze. A sudden chill caressed his skin, a breath of air that felt too human, too close. He fought the instinct to flee. Just a draft, he whispered to himself, feeling foolish for even trying to muster comfort in this accursed place, but as he reached the top landing, the whispers shifted into something darker. They swirled around him in a haunting chant, growing louder until they morphed into a single word that sent ice coursing through his veins. Mike. The sound wrapped around him, intimate yet chilling, like a long-lost friend calling from the darkness. He stepped back instinctively, his breath hitching. "No one should know my name," he whispered, eyes darting, hunting for the source. Suddenly, he spotted a faint flicker of light seeping from underneath a door at the end of the hallway. Electric tension hummed in the air, and every step toward it filled him with dread and a morbid sense of fascination. He had to know what lay beyond. Pushing the door open, he was greeted by an expansive room littered with remnants of a life once lived. Pictures lined the walls, shadows of the people frozen in time. But his eyes fixated on something else, a mirror standing tall in the center, the glass clouded but somehow pulsating with a life of its own. There, reflected, was not just Mike but another figure, standing directly behind him. His heart raced. He hadn't heard anyone enter. Terrified yet entranced, he turned slowly, but there was nothing. Just the heavy atmosphere of the room and shadows shifting in the corners. Turning back to the mirror, the figure remained, now grinning widely, its features obscured but malevolent. "Join us, Mike," it whispered, a chorus of voices blending seamlessly into one. His body went rigid as panic surged within him. He realized he wasn't alone inside the walls of the Miller house. He felt the darkness reach for him and he had to decide, fight, or succumb, but just as the first tendrils of the shade wrapped around his ankles, the ground beneath him began to quake, resetting the stage for something unimaginable. How far was he willing to go before losing himself entirely? As the room spun into chaos, a final question lingered, sharply focused: what awaited him on the other side of the mirror? The mirror shimmered with an eerie glow, casting strange shadows across the room. Mike's heart thundered in his chest. The figure still loomed behind him in the reflection, but now it seemed to shift, its grin widening, eyes dark and bottomless. Was that laughter? It echoed in his mind like icicles cracking against glass. "Don't fight it," the voice whispered, silkily slithering through the air, thickening the atmosphere. Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something within the mirror was clawing to break free. He clenched his fists, desperate for clarity. It was all in his head, right? A trick of the light and shadows. But deep down, a gnawing fear took root. This was not just darkness, it was alive. The ground trembled again, a low hum vibrating through his feet, merging with the panic rising in his throat. "Get out!" he shouted, yet his voice felt small against the oppressive hush. The air grew denser, it wrapped around him like an embrace, both constricting and inviting. What was he supposed to do? Just run? The thought of turning his back on the figure in the mirror sent chills racing down his spine. As he darted toward the half-open window, a breath of desperation fueled his movement. He hurled himself into the corridor, the echoes of his footfalls bouncing off the walls like a staccato heartbeat. But before he could reach the stairs, the whispers returned, swirling around him, teasing and taunting. "You can't escape, you belong here." Heart pounding, he grasped the railing, ready to leap down, but a flicker of movement caught his eye from the corner of the hallway. He turned to see a shadow scuttling just out of reach. Shadows flickered on the wall, distorting into twisted shapes a grotesque dance of terror. "Who's there?" he whispered, breathless. Fear held him captive, his mind racing to understand. Had he been wrong? Was he indeed not alone? Was there another presence? A soft laugh emerged from the darkness, echoing off the wallpaper. "We're waiting for you," it said, sweet and dangerous. Mike edged back, heart racing faster. "No. I'm not coming back," he forced himself to shout. Yet, somewhere deep inside, as he stared down the hallway, part of him felt inexplicably drawn to the audacious voice. What could it mean? Clenching his jaw, he breathed deep, fighting the urge to retreat further into the sanctuary of the living world. Just then, the lights flickered above him, casting the room into an even deeper shadow. Pools of inky blackness pooled in the corners, as if the very essence of fear was soaking into the floorboards. "I said no," he yelled, more to reassure himself than anything. But the shadows continued to beckon, flooding his mind with chaotic visions. Was he a coward for not answering their call? Or merely smart, holding on to his grasp of reality? But those reflections from the mirror danced in front of his eyes, tempting him with promises of unspoken knowledge. The ghostly laughter built around him, primal and electric, wrapping tightly around his psyche. Then, the whispers morphed again, rising to a deafening crescendo. "Join us, bring the others." It resonated within the very marrow of his bones, shaking him to the core. In an instant, a primal urge surged through him. He turned on his heel and dashed down the hallway. What awaited him at the end of it? Would he find an exit, or would he plunge deeper into that terrible darkness? As he fled, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that behind each door, something was stirring, waiting for him to surrender. The question loomed, heavy in the air. If he reached the end of the corridor, could he escape the fate whispered into existence, or would he find himself trapped in a haunting embrace of shadows forever? The corridor twisted ahead of him, a dark tunnel that seemed almost alive, pulsing with the energy of unseen horrors. Every footfall echoed like a death knell, bouncing off the walls and back at him, amplifying the terror pulsing through his veins. Out of the corner of his eye, he swore something flitted just beyond his reach. It darted from one shadow to another, each dart wildly unnatural and filled with malevolence. "Keep running," he murmured to himself, firming his resolve. The voices from behind him grew louder, a cacophony of taunts and temptation. "You're ours, you belong to us." Mike stumbled over the threshold into a larger room. His heart raced, drumming against his ribcage as frantic breaths filled his lungs. He scanned the walls, desperate for a beacon, for something recognizable in the consuming dark. But the place was unfamiliar, filled with distorted furniture and ghostly decor. The last thing he wanted was to stop. He just had to keep moving. Then, he heard it. A soft whimper, a sound he didn't dare to think about, sharp with fear, pulling him toward it. He froze, torn between fleeing and discovering who or what was in pain. Help! It was a plea, a raw, primal call. His feet remained rooted to the spot, caught in the vice of conflicting emotions. "Don't trust it," whispered the voice again, wrapping around him like a cold wind. "Shut up!" he shouted, and his voice reverberated, swallowed whole by the room. "Who is there?" he demanded, stepping forward, his heart hammering against logic. "Mike, save me!" The whisper slithered from the walls, echoing like a broken record. It curled around him as shadows danced grotesquely, casting fleeting images of agonized faces. Each flicker felt like a warning, a promise from the shadows ready to ensnare him. With a quick shake of his head, Mike pressed on. He had to find a way out. "You're just a figment of your imagination," he told himself, but doubt twisted in his gut like a knife. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind him, the sound like thunder reverberating through his bones. Panic surged. He cast a glance back, but the darkness whooshed around him like a tempest, holding him in a spectral embrace that urged him deeper. "Join us!" The voices melded into one, an insatiable chorus welcoming him to the abyss. Each word dripped with malevolence, nearly palpable, as the shadows stretched closer, eager to consume him whole. Each step forward seemed to drag him backward, a push and pull with no end. He found himself gravitating toward the door at the far end of the room, the only source of perceived salvation. There, lighter than the surrounding gloom, a faint glow beckoned him. But as he approached, another shadow darted across his path, quick and alarming as lightning. Mike stumbled backward, panic morphing into sheer terror. "Leave him!" cried a disembodied voice, suddenly sharp, slicing through the expectations built by the others. "You can't trust them, Mike." His heart dropped. Who was talking? Was someone else trapped in here? In a moment of disorientation, He glanced around, torn between the source of the plea and the enticing glow ahead. The shadows fell heavy around him, closing in as desperation clawed at his throat. "Don't let them take you." But as Mike reached for the door, the ominous whispers crescendoed. The pressure mounted. He could feel the tendrils of darkness reaching, pulling him back, grasping at his very essence, while the phantom voice from the depths begged him to choose. Would he pick the light, risking whatever awaited there? Or would he fall deeper into the suffocating darkness, falling into the arms of those who waited, hungry for him to join their tortured existence? Do it. Choose. The command echoed, solid and demanding. With an electric jolt of fear coursing through him, Mike lunged for the door, heart racing at the critical moment. The choice loomed: would it set him free, or seal his fate forever? He swung it open, eyes wide, and the world beyond was not what he expected. He stepped through the door and was immediately swallowed by blinding light. It felt as if 1,000 suns had just ignited before him, scorching his retinas. Mike shielded his eyes, stumbling blindly into the space beyond. As the brightness faded, he found himself in what appeared to be a small, sterile room. The walls were white, almost blindingly so, and the scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. There were no shadows here, no looming terror, just a cold, clinical atmosphere that made every hair on his body stand on end. This wasn't a sanctuary, it was a trap. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Before he could gather his thoughts, faint movements caught his attention. In the far corner, tied to a metal chair, was a woman. Her face was pale, features gaunt, eyes wide with terror. The room shook with an eerie silence, thick with dread, as she locked eyes with Mike. "Help me," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it broke through the silence like a knife. Mike felt the familiar pull of compassion, and yet the shadows of doubt crept back into his mind. "Is this real?" he thought, recalling the chilling voices from before. "Am I being led into another trap?" "Stay away from her," echoed that sharp, disembodied voice, slicing through the room's chilling stillness. "She's not who you think she is." Guilt gnawed at his gut. Was she an innocent victim in need, or a deception from the shadows? The conflicting emotions clawed at him, leaving him immobilized. He looked back at the woman, her eyes pleading with undeniable sincerity. "Please just trust me," she begged, her voice cracking, trembling as if the weight of the world lay on her shoulders. Just then, the door behind him slammed shut with a thunderous clap that echoed through the sterile space. Panic flooded Mike's veins. He turned back just in time to see the surface of the door morphing under the pressure, something dark and sinister forming on the other side. "Mike," the voice returned, softer now but laced with malice. "You know what to do. Give in to the shadows. They will accept you, just like they accepted her." He felt icy dread creeping over him, drowning out any sense of rationality. The woman's muffled cries appeared to cast a spell, a twisted fragility that tied into his deepest fears. "What if it's a game?" he thought. "What if I'm meant to save her, only to be ensnared by those I tried to defy?" "Choose." The voice commanded, now outside the door as something hard began to bang against it, relentless like a storm gathering strength. "Stop fighting, Mike." The woman squirmed in her chair, her bound hands straining against the ropes. "No. Don't listen to them," she shouted, desperation seeping through her words. "You're stronger than this." Mike's heart raced, a wild drum echoing through the air. He was faced with a horrifying choice. Dive into the unknown and potentially save her, or give in to the dark promises of the whispers. How could he decide? Every second felt like an eternity as the door shuddered against the force of whatever was behind it. He could feel the room vibrating with tension and fear. The shadows at the edges of his vision twisted and writhed like restless specters, pulling him in, seducing him with visions of freedom. He pressed his palms against the cold wall, tension thrumming through him like a live wire. "What do I do?" And then, as if answering his silent question, the lights flickered violently, leaving him in fleeting darkness. Then, the lights returned, blaring bright, illuminating something shocking. The woman's face twisted in agony, and monstrous shadows emerged from behind her, their hands stretching toward Mike as the screams echoed in his mind. "Help me, please." But the door exploded open, and a figure emerged from the chaos, someone Mike never expected. "Get out now!" they shouted, fear etched across their face. As their eyes locked onto Mike's, recognition washed over him. It was someone from his past, someone he thought was lost forever. Where had they come from? And was this figure guiding him to safety, or into a deeper nightmare? "Mike, hurry!" the figure yelled as shadows engulfed their form. Could he trust them? The choice lingered in that haunting uncertainty, and just like that, the shadows charged, hungry for his soul. What would happen next? Would he escape, or would he plunge into the darkness that awaited? The answer danced tantalizingly out of reach as he prepared for a choice that could either lead to salvation or doom. The shadows rumbled like thunder, swirling around Mike as if alive, clawing at the air with insatiable hunger. He hesitated, eyes darting between the woman in the chair and the figure now braving the door, a lifeline amidst chaos. "Who are you?" he shouted, but the roar of the shadows drowned out his desperate plea. "Don't think. Just run." the figure screamed, extending their hand, fingers trembling but resolute. The darkness pulsed, an ominous heartbeat, every second counting down like a time bomb. Without thinking, without reason, Mike surged forward. He grabbed the figure's hand, a lifeline pulling him from the abyss. Their grip felt warm and familiar, a memory he didn't realize he craved. But as they turned to flee, a shrieking wail erupted from the shadows, echoing through the sterile walls. The bound woman screamed too. "No! Don't leave me!" Her pitiful cries pierced Mike's heart like daggers, twisting him up inside. "Mike!" The figure pulled him harder, urgency etched in their wild eyes. The shadows surged, rising like a tide determined to sweep them away. "Stop! We can't leave her!" Panic unleashed within him, a torrent of emotions battling for dominance. "She's a trap!" the figure shouted, tugging again. "We don't have time to argue." Just as Mike opened his mouth to protest, the woman's eyes turned from fear to something darker. A flicker of understanding crossed her features. "You don't know what you're doing, Mike. Choose. They will take you." The creature's shadows surged, taking on forms hearkening to long-lost fears, exaggerated versions of guilt, pain, and regret. Mike stumbled back but found the door snug against his back like a prison cell. The instinct to flee warred with a compulsion to protect someone trapped in despair. "Trust me," the figure yelled, then a glimmer of recognition passed. "You can't save her." The shadows swept closer, tendrils reaching for Mike, as if sensing the conflict within him. He could feel their whispers seeping into his mind, entangling him deeper into a net of haunting memories. "I can help you," the figure implored, desperation spilling over. "You don't belong here. Not with her." He felt the weight of her eyes on him, pooling with sorrow and desperation. "Please help me before it's too late," her voice dragged through the air, half prayer, half plea, resonating deep within him. And then, as if responding to his turmoil, the lights flickered again. For a fractured moment, he was back, standing over a grave with fresh earth disrupted, the weight of choices echoing in his mind. Was this how destiny twisted in unseen ways? Was he to succumb to the shadows because of a past still haunting him? The urgency clawed at him until he could hardly breathe. "Mike!" the figure snapped, pulling at his arm again. "We don't have time. Make a choice." In a wild instinct, he pulled his hand free and took a step back, heart racing, the world around him swirling between memories and the harsh reality of that sterile room. The shadows roared, no longer shy, all-consuming, shouting promises of power and whispers of fear, and just then, without warning, a new sound pierced the chaos, a crack like bone breaking. He turned to see the fabric of the shadows rippling, revealing something unexpected. From the depths of the darkness emerged a reflection, a figure with eyes akin to his own, despair painting their face. "Mike," it choked, "help me." Frozen, Mike's heart twisted painfully. Was this another trap, or was it a mirror of his soul, revealing the cost of his choices? "Mike, let go." The figure shouted again, fear screaming in their voice, but he was rooted to the ground, caught between two fates, one dragging him into the light and one threatening to consume him whole. What would he do? How could he find clarity amid the chaos? As the shadows shifted aggressively around both the woman and the reflection, the nightmarish grasp tightened, threatening to drown him. Would he sacrifice everything to flee, or dive headfirst into an unknown darkness? The answer hovered ominously, lingering just out of reach as the shadows cavorted for control, waiting for his next move. Time was running out. Which path would he ultimately take? The air thickened, stifling all thought as Mike remained torn, paralyzed between the shadowed despair of the woman and the anguished reflection of himself. Each second felt like an eternity, his heart hammering as shadows whispered promises of oblivion in his ears. "Mike, please." The figure at the door begged, their voice strained. "I can't lose you too." A frenzied pulse filled the room, the shadows converging closer, hungry and relentless, seizing every fragment of resolve he possessed. With every heartbeat, the reflection's eyes, those dark, sorrowful eyes, sank deeper into his conscience, stirring forgotten emotions. Who was this figure? Why did it resemble him so intimately? Desperation clawed at him, a sensation that begged him to reach out, to embrace something lost. The bound woman shrieked again, her voice raw with pain. "Don't listen to them, Mike. They want to take you from me. You can save us both." The words slithered through the air, dripping with urgency, yet also weaving a web of doubt. "Save you from what?" Mike shouted, pushing back against the creeping shadows. "From what you've become." "Stop." The figure by the door shouted, fear etched in their face. "You're not seeing the truth. She's a monster dressed as a victim." As the shadows twisted and snarled, Mike's heart ached with each pulse of chaos. He felt the weight of the choices pressing down on him like the weight of a collapsing star, drawing him into the void. He could already sense the darkness wrapping around his mind, trying to drag him into the depths of a brutal choice, one that hinged on his desire to save or to flee. "Mike." The voice grew desperate, cracking under pressure. "Don't be fooled. You were always meant for more than this." The reflection's expression morphed into something darker, the same sorrow now a mask of malice. "What are you doing? Can't you see? Keeping her here means your end." A jolt of realization coursed through Mike. The shadowed woman was a mirror reflecting his own failures, the pain he had avoided for too long. If he left her, what would he become? But if he stayed? Suddenly, the shadows rose in frenzy, an eruption of manic laughter echoed through the sterile room. The darkness cajoled him with vivid images of glory, promises of power dripped sweetly into his ears, trying to allure him into surrender. "Join us, Mike. Embrace your truth, run." The figure lunged for him, eyes wide with urgency, grasping for his hand again, yanking him back from the precipice. They were his only hope, yet the shadows swirled like hungry wolves, trying to separate them, hungry for Mike's indecision. "Make a choice." The voice was despairing, the shadows screeching in opposition, their clamorous insistence nearly drowning all out. "Now!" The figure yelled, tugging at him as the shadows clawed at their legs, snapping threateningly. But in that split second, amidst the noise, Mike caught a glimmer of light behind the reflection. Something fluttering hope, perhaps igniting a spark etched within his chest. Just as he felt himself begin to waver, a thunderous roar filled the air, echoing from the depths of the shadows. They surged, lashing out violently, ready to engulf him entirely. And in that moment of chaos, he made his choice, but the gasp that escaped him, was it a sound of relief or of dread? The world shook violently as he leaped toward the figure he initially trusted, desperate to escape the doom lurking within the shadows. The reflection twisted, morphing into something monstrous. "Mike. You've chosen." Their voice resonated in his mind, filling him with an insistent urgency. but the moment the shadows enveloped him, darkness shattered every expectation he had. What awaited him now was unknown. Lurking just beyond the reach of his trembling imagination, would he find salvation in escape or be dragged into the depths by shadows hungry for his very essence? The moment Mike crossed the threshold into the swirling darkness, a chill washed over him, freezing every thought in his mind. It felt as if he had leaped into a different dimension, one shrouded in shadows that writhed and pulsed like living entities. His senses sharpened, he could hear the faint echo of his heartbeat, each thump heavy with fear. Mike. The voice cut through the dark, pulling him back toward awareness that he turned, trying to find the figure he had chosen over the reflection. But the shadows shifted, obscuring his surroundings. The woman's desperate cries echoed, fading into distant whimpers as the darkness pressed in closer. "Where are you?" he shouted, panic clawing at his insides. He had thought he'd chosen light, but all around him was a smothering void. For a moment, reality faded. He saw flickers of memories, faces of people he'd left behind, drowning in regret and unfulfilled promises. The laughter of friends long gone, the touch of loved ones, the warmth of moments spent in true happiness. But just as quickly, those memories twisted into mockery, sinister whispers echoing, reminding him of every failure he had ever faced. "Let go," the shadows hissed, wrapping around him like chains. "Embrace the darkness. It's where you truly belong." "No." He gasped, determination igniting within him. He fought against the suffocating clutches, pushing through the heaviness, desperate to remember who he was. But the past clawed at his insides, each failure lacerating his resolve. "Trust me." The voice returned, clearer this time, and as he strained to hear, it felt as if a beacon of hope was cutting through the fog. "Find me." He focused on that call, scrambling toward its source. The shadows clawed and tugged at him, their icy fingers reaching out like vicious talons. Each step felt monumental, each movement a battle against the weight of despair. Then it happened. A faint glimmer caught his eye, a flicker of light illuminating a figure struggling against the oppressive dark. "Mike." The figure lunged toward him, recognition sparked in their eyes, a mirrored image of his own anguish but also radiating a fierce resolve. It was that person, the one who had fought to save him. The shadows howled their frustration, transforming into a whirlwind of screams, snapping at his heels. "Go back. You can't escape your destiny." He felt the weight of their threat, knew the truth that weighed heavily in his heart. What kind of person would he be if he surrendered? "Hold on." The figure shouted, stretching out a hand toward him. But the shadows surged forward, desperate to consume him whole. Gritting his teeth, Mike summoned every ounce of strength. He lunged toward that hand of hope. And as their fingers intertwined, a pulse of warmth radiated through him, dispelling the biting cold of despair that sought to claim him. The shadows screamed, a chilling sound that vibrated through the air, but Mike held on. The light surrounding them brightened, illuminating the darkness as he grasped the figure tighter and took a resolute step forward, but just as he thought he had broken free, the shadows convulsed violently, coiling back as if preparing for one last ferocious assault. "Mike." The figure's voice was now a mixture of fear and urgency. "We need to run." With no time to doubt, Mike turned away from the grasping darkness, pulling the figure with him. They raced through the thickening fog, the screams of the shadows becoming a haunting chorus behind them. Just as the darkness began to fracture, revealing a sliver of an exit ahead, a deep growl rumbled through the air. Something more menacing than shadows was awakening, lurking beneath the surface, and this was only the beginning of the horror that awaited them. What new terror would they face just beyond the veil? Would the choice Mike made be enough to save them, or would it lead to even darker consequences? Their feet pounded against the unseen ground, the darkness acting like a living thing, clawing and biting at their ankles. The figure beside Mike was a beacon, but that light flickered as dread seeped back into the air. "What is that?" he gasped, feeling the vibrations of the deep growl through his bones. The sound reverberated off unseen walls, curling around them like an icy breath. "I don't know, but we can't stop," she replied, determination etched across her face, but fear flickered in her eyes, threatening to extinguish the hope that pulsed between them. They tore through the veil, the shadows gnashing their teeth, overcome with a frenzied fury. Just as Mike thought they might actually escape, ghastly shapes began to materialize at the periphery of their vision, monstrous figures that writhed like smoke but moved with unmistakable purpose. "Run faster!" she screamed, and he felt the tug of adrenaline fuel his legs. But with every stride, the howl behind them intensified, a cacophony of tortured souls being condemned to an eternity of suffering, their misery thickening the atmosphere. The door, the one escape, was just ahead, a slit of shimmering light in an all-consuming void. But time slowed as the growl morphed into a roar, shattering their resolve. The darkness recoiled, coiling like a viper ready to strike. "Mike!" Her voice pierced through the chaos, laden with urgency. But it was suddenly drowned out by a number of anguished screams, and the ground beneath them quaked violently. The shadows were no longer just a backdrop, they took on form, contorting into grotesque apparitions that looked unnervingly familiar, as if they were faces of people he once knew. "No! This can't be happening!" he shouted, shaking his head, squinting at the phantom versions of those he had failed. Their eyes are voids of despair, stretching into creepy smiles that twisted what he believed. "Keep going. Don't look back!" she yelled, dragging him forward as fear rippled through the air. For what felt like an eternity, they sprinted toward the light, hope surging like a pulse in their chests. As they reached the doorway, a shadow shot out from the depths, blocking their escape, its form shifting rapidly. Something inhuman and ancient hovered there, malicious intensity burning bright in its eyes. "You cannot escape the truths of your past," it roared, its voice ripping through Mike's defenses like daggers. Every failure he tried to forget flashed before his eyes, every disappointment, every loss, and every betrayal he had faced. Those moments surged like waves, crashing mercilessly against him, threatening to drag him under with its weight. "No!" he shouted, clenching his jaw, fighting against the tide of sorrow. Seconds felt like hours, and the shadows began to close in, rage sweeping over him, declaring ownership of his soul. But as dread wrapped around him, another thought emerged, the warmth of her hand still in his, their fingers intertwined. "Trust me, Mike. We can break through this." Her voice stood firm, igniting a defiance in him. "Away from here. Past that shadow," he shouted, renewed strength flooding his veins. They pushed forward together, colliding with the inky blackness that loomed in their way. The shadow shrieked, a sound of anguish that echoed like the screams of those it had consumed. Disoriented but resolute, Mike and the figure surged through the doorway, and with the last moment of clarity, he realized this was not just a rescue, it was a battle for their very souls. They stumbled into a new space, gasping for breath. The starkness of light enveloped them, yet the echo of the growl lingered, hinting at the darkness still lurking, just outside their reach. What awaited them in this new realm? Was this truly an escape, or merely a pause before the chaos reignited? Secrets loomed ahead, darker than shadows, and the next choice would be one that could swallow them whole. The blinding light began to fade, giving way to a dimly lit space. Mike blinked hard, soaking in the reality surrounding him as his heart hammered against his ribcage. Every detail around him felt oddly familiar yet surreal. They were standing inside a sun-soaked room, but the air was thick with an unsettling weight, reminding him of the darkness they just fled. "Are we safe?" he murmured, chest tight with anxiety. The figure beside him, still holding his hand steadfastly, glanced around the room. Her eyes reflected a mix of caution and relief. "I don't know, but we're out of that nightmare for now," she replied, as shadows danced along the periphery of her vision, flickering like broken shards of their past. Suddenly, a low rumble reverberated through the air, vibrating Mike's bones deep. "It's not over, Mike," she warned, pulling him closer. "They'll come for us." Panic bled into her voice like ink spreading through paper. "Who will?" he asked, nerves prickling. Just as she opened her mouth to answer, the air thinned around them, and with a shatter, the walls filled with shifting darkness. A familiar, hideous growl crawled from the edges. The shadows were closing in again. Run! She shouted, yanking him toward a door at the other end of the room. They dashed forward, hearts racing, feet pounding against the floor as the shadows twisted and writhed like a tempest of hellish whispers. "Mike, you have to focus," she called out, her grip firm on his arm even as the darkness clawed at their heels. "Remember what we learned. Remember your strength." He nodded, fear gnawing away at rational thought. Each step felt like they were sprinting against time, but Mike fought against the rising tide of despair that gripped his mind. Images of faces he loved, friends, family flickered through his thoughts, begging him to turn back, but with each painful memory that surfaced, he felt their love ignite a flame inside him. As they barreled through the door, the darkness surged behind them, screeching and howling, collapsing in on itself like a black hole. The throaty growl rose, desperate to claim them once more, but Mike summoned every ounce of courage. "He wouldn't let it win. I want to let you take me," he shouted, surprising himself with the intensity of his own voice. With every ounce of determination, he dove forward, drawing upon the warmth of that comforting memory of light, the memory of those loved ones. Bursting through the door, Mike found himself in an expansive courtyard filled with vibrant life. Trees swayed gently in a sun-drenched breeze, colorful flowers blossomed in clusters, and the sky painted with hues of orange and blue shimmered above. It felt like a postcard come to life, a stark contrast to the horrors they had endured. "Is this real?" he gasped, the air feeling thick with possibility. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's all a trick," she replied, scanning the horizon, her face flush with an uncertain thrill. "Whatever this is, we're alive, we have a chance." But before they could fully absorb the moment, a chilling sensation swept over them. A surge of shadows lunged through the door they'd just burst from, boiling with rage and despair, seeking to reclaim what it lost. "Not again," Mike whispered, dread rooting him to the spot. "In here," she urged, grabbing his hand as they raced to a small stone hut tucked away behind wildflowers. Inside, it felt safe, shielded from the encroaching darkness. They huddled in the corner, breaths heavy, listening as the shadows screamed outside. "What do they want?" Mike whispered, heart pounding against his ribs. "They want you," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. In her gaze, he found not only fear but a flicker of hope, determination. "But you're stronger than they know. Your past is your power now." He felt an inconceivable weight lift from his chest, her words sank deep, grounding him. Remember the truth of his journey, of all those choices he had made. The truth of resilience in the face of darkness. Rising to his feet, a vision ignited in his mind, memories and lessons learned through struggles. Mike held on to that light, aimed it outward. "I will not be your prisoner," he declared, adrenaline pumping through his veins. With one deep breath, he stepped back toward the door, determination radiating off him like sunlight. The shadows recoiled at his presence, confusion rippling through their restless forms. "Together," he said, looking back at her. "We face this." She nodded. Together, they burst into the light, holding hands as they stepped out into the chaos. The shadows surged forward, but instead of fear, he felt something else, a sense of ownership over the pain that threatened to swallow him. "Enough!" Mike shouted, his voice reverberating with power. "You don't own me anymore." A tidal wave of energy unleashed as the shadows hesitated, caught off guard. He poured every ounce of regret into that moment, transforming it into raw strength. The darkness writhed, releasing a chorus of anguished wails as the light pushed through, blinding them. "Look!" she exclaimed, pointing to a shifting portal forming in the shadowy expanse. "Let us go!" Mike yelled, their hands still intertwined. The shadows began to implode, spiraling as the portal widened before them. They raced toward it, feeling the warmth of freedom beckoning. "Together," he reminded, taking her hand with renewed intensity. United in purpose, they leapt through, the world bursting into brilliant colors. And as the darkness collapsed behind them, they found solace on the other side, a new beginning, unmarred by the shadows of the past. Laughter and voices echoed around them, familiar ones. His family. Friends. They were there, welcoming him back to a life filled with laughter, love, and possibilities. Together, they stepped forward, embraced by light, leaving the haunting shadows behind forever. As the sun dipped low, casting vibrant shades across the sky, Mike felt the weight of what he had faced lift from his shoulders. No more shadows chasing him, no more whispers tormenting his mind. He had chosen light. He had chosen life. The journey had etched scars on his soul, but now they intertwined with hope, teaching him to embrace the beauty of second chances. Before slipping into the warmth of the familiar arms, Mike took one last look at the horizon, knowing for the first time this was where he was meant to be. Now, as this incredible tale concludes, it's your turn to be part of this journey. You need to subscribe now to catch all the exclusive stories coming soon. Smash that like button now to help feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Mike's journey and what you think will happen next. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything. Share the thrill of storytelling. Let us keep these adventures alive together.